Okay. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Firstly, thanks to Canon Collins for hosting this and for Princess for organizing in connection with Canon Collins. And thank you, Catherine. Thank you also to Mtunzekazi. And I'll come back to Mtunzekazi because I'm actually Mtunzekazi's work has also made me rework my work. So we are constantly in conversation, but I'll talk about that another time. So thank you for both those poems, Itswele and Nonga Indoda. And I think they're actually linked, both of them are linked to this question that Princess is asking. So on nothingness. This is a not necessarily a tricky question, but maybe it's one of those questions that I seem to keep returning to and maybe revising. So initially, the idea of nothingness, I mean, you trace it from Sabelo Ndlovu-Gajeni, I can trace it from elsewhere, and have used it, Mbembe talks about it and Mbembe traces it from elsewhere. So there's, it has its own genealogy. And I think what it comes to as we're experiencing it now is really the idea that I mean, it's actually a struggle for me on the one hand to consider those branded human, whether with a capital H or small h. Sylvia Winter makes this distinction. So if we're human, can we be simultaneously nothing? And this is a question that I'm sitting with at the moment. So if we see ourselves as human, yeah, and of course, as colonized beings, we probably are human with a small h. If we see ourselves as human, is our thingification already predetermined? Our thingness, our position of being a thing, is that already predetermined? And if so, then what is the point of the category human? What value does it add? Yeah. But if human with a small h is not directly linked to the notion of being a thing, of being thingified, then maybe there's possibilities for human to exist outside the realm of the nothing. And maybe I want to entertain that part now. Because I've always considered, humans with the small h as nothing. Humans also, humans as identifiable subjects, but also, I mean, humans as subjects with also rights as we are, as we exist now. But if humans are these identifiable subjects, then maybe they're not only nothing, because one of the conditions of being nothing is also not being recognized. So, and I talk in this lecture, I talk about recognition. So this is why I'm saying I'm starting to revise my own thinking. Is that maybe there isn't such an easy connection between human with a small h and nothingness. It's not an automatic or a given link that perhaps as things which are not only nothing, we exist, but we need to figure out the nature of our thingness. Because as things, there is a moment of recognition. We are given a possibility to exist to some extent. And you see this now also in what's happening in our continent. There's a recognition that there are these things that are roaming around the continent saying they are queer, they are this, they are that, and we have to, create systems to exclude them or to make them nothing. But there's already an identity, like there's already a recognition that they are things. These things do to some extent exist. And yeah, so in my revisions of my own thinking, I'm saying, let us figure out what kind of things we are and how valuable our thingness can be.
Okay, so I guess what you are asking us to do now is to say, okay, yes, we are things, but what things are we and how do we exist in that thinginess, so to speak? I would love to bring us back to the idea of lies and truths.
Let me go back there. So I said I'm linking this to Mthunzekazi. So if you go back to Mthunzekazi's poem, the one on Nonga Indoda, actually both of them, Itswele and Nonga Indoda. In Nonga Indoda, Mthunzekazi says, Unonga Indoda, agayondo. But he also says, Nonga Indoda Indo is a thing, is also not a thing. But doesn't say, and in this clause, a nothing and a thing that is not a thing are not the same. Yeah, to be indo engeyondo is to already suggest that you're already a thing. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. It is this element of being a thing, this notion of thingness that for me is important to grapple with. At this point, I mean, this is not a project for other people. It's just my own, because every time I think about my work, I have to say, okay, where else can I take this? And this is now where I'm taking it. But also going back to the question of Itswele, the poem Itswele, which is, it's an object, right? But it's not. I mean, you can, in the poem, you can think of it as an object that is an edible object, Itswele, the onion itself, but Itswele as in the figurative Itswele, what it does, yeah, its aromas, its attachment to clothing, to skin, its layers, and all that. So that object, that thing of Itswele becomes a very important thing to actually theorize, yeah? So Itswele in that poem kind of sits in place for the thing that I'm interested in. And that thing could be a thing of, a thing that is queer, a thing that is, human with a small h, a thing that is, African, a thing that does so many, that opens up so many opportunities. That is not wanted, but already takes over the space. I mean, you can, just imagine the idea of when you have an onion in the room, the power it has. So if you are imagining that thing, as small as it is, and the power that it has, then for me, it's important to already think of, queerness as a thing that also has that kind of power. So unfortunately, I've moved away from nothing.
From nothingness. Okay, so you're now with the fact that we are recognizable things, but how do we move with that thinginess? And what does it look like? And what possibilities are within that thinginess, not the nothingness? I had asked about the lies. I think it's something that features a lot in your work, the lies and the truths. I think one of the things that comes out of your talk there is the idea of the Africanness of queerness, but also how we see, even in so-called progressive dispensations like South Africa, that lie still becomes the basis or the foundation that sustains homophobia. Or we see the case studies of the women that you refer to have been killed in the so-called progressive landscapes. So what do you have to say about those lies? Is there space for truth ever? And perhaps what do these truths look like?
Interesting. I think you are referring, this question is coming out of the previous lecture on truth that we participated in last week. So you're asking what is truth, right? I think that's what I'm getting.
Yes, and the idea, I wanted you to unpack the idea of the lie, especially the un-Africanness of queerness, and how we see it sustaining homophobic regimes, not only in other countries, but even South Africa that is so-called progressive. And I'm saying in this space where we think the truth should be taking, they're not. So what's
okay? I don't know if it's my connection, but you keep I keep missing you. Am I correct, or it's my connection only?
No, Princess, you're breaking up.
Okay, but I think I get the gist of the question. So okay, so interesting. So let me first give a reference. I know some of you who are on this call have read the text. It's by Thabo Msibi. He's based at UKZN, and it's called The Lies We Have Been Told. And it focuses on issues around homosexuality in Africa. So I would recommend that text to please go and read that as we would talk about these kinds of lies. So there's definitely many lies around issues around sexuality, not even just about homosexuality, just about sexuality in the continent. You know, the kind of thinking that Africa is heterosexual. I mean, that is a lie, and it comes with colonialist mindsets. There's also another text I would recommend. Actually, and I know many people have never read it. It's by two historians, Mark Epprecht and okay, I'll remember the name. But in this book, it's published by HSRC Press. In this book, there's some archival material that the two historians found in the early 1900s in South Africa, around the mines. Late 1800s, yeah, around, well, 1900s at the beginning of the mining. And what I found fascinating from these archival records was how, for example, when, you know, there's a case, for example, the first case in South Africa around homosexuality was with Klaas Blank, an indigenous man who was put into Robben Island because and had a sexual affair with a Dutch sailor. Okay, and going back to that record, one gets to understand how, for example, yes, thank you, working class homosexuality in South African history. Thank you for that. And going back to that record, one gets to understand how sexuality and sexual relations became, I wouldn't say even misinterpreted, but they were interpreted through a very religious lens, and through a lens that automatically suggested that things because they're happening on African soil, they cannot exist. So in this book, Working Class Homosexuality in South Africa, one of the records talks about how men in mines were engaging in these sexual affairs, and then they and the colonizers would arrest them, or when they would investigate, they would arrest them, and then when they were taken to court, it would be the clerks, the court clerks, who were white women, who would then reinterpret what they were hearing. So, for example, somebody says in court that we shared a blanket and we were intimate, and the person got on top of me and we had a good time. And the interpretation by the court clerk would say they were doing illicit sexual relations. But the person says we were having a good time. Yeah. And so this is then how the lie starts slipping into our own imagination, because, you know, what happens is that we read what is written and we take it as the ultimate evidence, and that circulates as if that is the only truth. Yeah. And so a lot of the lies that exist are lies that actually have been manufactured by reinterpreting the truth or removing the truth, removing truths completely. Which means even the way in which we do research, those of us who do archival work have to read and reread through and between the lines and against the lines, because, you know, if you are not paying attention to the colonial project and to the project of reinterpreting Black people's lives, you would just say in 1905, Black people were having illicit sexual affairs, and not reading that in 1905, these people were enjoying having deep sexual connections together.
Thank you for that, Prof. There's obviously a lot to say. I want to pick on that and move on with the conversation, but towards a different tangent altogether. Perhaps to bring us back to the conversation around what we can do to cease existing in this realm of nothingness. I know you said you've moved from that, but you speak about the realm of nothingness and how the project is for us to move from that nothingness. And I guess it still is the same, to move from nothingness to thinginess.
Princess.
So the guys that are here, what do you think is the role of love and intimacy in this project? Because you speak to the fact that we have also created beautiful things. We've created love, we've created intimacy. What do you think is the role of that in shifting the narrative, in helping us move from this realm of nothingness? And then perhaps I would also say, what does the remembering look like? And this is something you say, of course, in your invitation on part 4, but I really want you to speak to that.
Okay. I mean, this shift is new for me also, okay? But, I mean, you know, our scholarship always has to grow, so it's part of my own expansion. So, I mean, I want people to still interrogate nothing as I'm doing it. And yeah, perhaps as I shift towards a different thinking of things, then I'll have something more to say. But I mean, I think by now we kind of have accepted that love is an important, well, I don't even know what to call love. It's an important force. I mean, yeah, you can read bell hooks all about love, and you kind of get a guide to how love could help you rethink some of these ideas. At the same time, I'm wondering if our society really has the capacity to produce, manufacture, distribute, and really make it, not make love as in the physical makingness of making love, but make love as a political project. I mean, we know there is a coexistence, and I don't know how deep and useful it is, the coexistence of deep forms of violence and torture with love, and how one can make use of love to actually work against, the kinds of violence and torture and all these other things that we do. And I mean, so for me, love is actually I think it's a project that we need to spend more time thinking through. Yeah, it's very tricky, Princess. I mean, it's easy to say yes. Let's go for that. Let's go for that idea. But I really feel that as a society, we have to invest in rethinking what is the project of love, and what would it look like. I mean, I don't think in South Africa, for example, we've ever had that kind of project. We've had a project of truth telling, which was dismal. We've had a project of reconciliation, which was also dismal. We've had different kinds of projects, but a love project and then love ethic is something that we, as a society, we haven't really paid attention to outside, these flimsy love things like, love stories that you find on TV and commercial, and hearts and commercialized love. But love as an ethic, and love as a deep political project, I think that's something that could be our next project as a country. I don't know, as a society, actually, and trying to figure out what it would really look like in this very fragmented space. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Prof. I would be selfish to ask more questions. Of course, I have a lot of questions, especially around love and intimacy. But let me now allow other people to come through, to have conversation, to ask questions, to contribute. I see a hand. That's Catherine.
Yeah, I've just opened it up so we can all see each other, and you're welcome to put on your videos now. Because I watched the lecture for the second time today, and the thing that really kind of stuck with me and that I use as a lens to kind of think about everything you were saying was that quote from Audre Lorde at the beginning, where you said we cannot use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house, and then connecting this idea of the queerness as a space of imaginary. And I just wanted to ask you to talk about it with relation to this idea of love as a political project, because obviously this is a stream of your thinking, that queerness and the expression of love and intimacy is one of the tools that we can use to dismantle the master's house, because it doesn't effectively sit in his toolbox, if that makes sense. I just wanted to ask you to comment on that, and then also draw attention to some of the questions that are in the chat already. So from Iva, is the idea of thingness not a deepening of the dehumanization process and part of the struggle towards the ontological vocation to become human, and the urgency for us to fully understand what it really means to be human? All of this fits into this thing of the political project of love. I'd love to know also if you've seen that anyway, Zethu, what it looks like.
You've seen how love as a political project works?
Yes. Even in a micro, cosmic view. Am I asking a lot here?
I think if I've seen it, I would be going towards, I would gravitate towards it. No, definitely. I mean, I think in the second question, I've definitely seen love projects as community building, for example. So, and I've seen it in weird spaces. So, I mean, of course, many people know that I am part of the queer community, and I'm actually very lucky to also be in a space where I spend a lot of time with Black lesbian or Black queer women in other parts of the world, and they have a lot of. Their ethic is really around love, living together, choosing to have, to commune together, creating space where they can live on their own and live together. Some people may call that separatist, but it's actually not. It's finding different ways of being, and also just coming together in a different kind of ethical project. But I think, also I'm talking about this particular project that I participate in, and I'm also recognizing that the reason why it continues to exist is because of the transgression because of the violence that this project has to encounters daily in society. So these women have managed to build a community for themselves that is around a love ethic, because the wider society is so much racist and anti-Black and anti-women, etc. So they create this space through, home sharing and all kinds of different kinds of ideas that come with this idea of love, that they can exist as, as a free space within a space that actually doesn't allow for freedom to exist. So that's one. And I'm still looking for many others. And to see how these can be replicated, see if it's possible to replicate in society. But also, as I'm saying, it is because there's always a tension in wider society. And that's why that's why the Love Ethic Project can exist. So it's not on a micro scale, not on a macro scale, it is at a very small community-based scale. And I haven't seen it anywhere else. But I would be curious actually to learn from people what they have seen and what they have experienced. And I'm also not even sure what my imagination of a political project on love as a society actually really looks like. It's an imagination, and an imagination and a desire. And I'm not sure, because I've never seen it in a macro scale, so I don't really know what it is that I'm desiring. I'm imagining a desire. I'm imagining a possibility, but it's not something that I can say, okay, here it is, and I've seen it and it works, But if people know of other contexts, societies, nations that actually have this, then I would be curious to learn more. The question, on Love and Audre Lorde. Well, is it possible? I mean, it's like reading bell hooks and Audre Lorde together, right? And then in that mix, you can put in, Okay, now I'm actually thinking of a text. A conversation. It was a conversation between Audre Lorde and the name escapes me. Okay, I will remember. Essayist. Okay. Anyway, so in this conversation, if I remember it, I'll tell you. In the conversation, it's really about the question of love, and it is a question of love between Black men and Black women in a society that a society that actually does not cater for love to exist. Yes, James Baldwin, very good, thank you. Yeah, conversation between Audre Lorde and James Baldwin. And towards the end of that conversation, I mean, the two have, I mean, they're from the same context, and it's kind of like an argument, but I like towards the end where Baldwin says to Audre Lorde, please be patient with us. And Audre Lorde is kind of like, no, actually, yeah, like Black men, no. And I'm wondering if that quest for patience is something that could also be well, if it's necessary. I mean, Audre Lorde makes a point that actually, no, we cannot be, because society is not patient with us as Black women. But, you know, there's this request to be patient. And the request makes me wonder about the other kinds of requests that we can make to ourselves as humans, particularly as Black people in society, or men and women, and how we can, you know, and how we can carve a way forward. Whether it is through this thing of love that we can practice together, because as I'm saying, I don't really know what that love is. But if patience is the gateway to love, is it possible then to practice that? And this is a key question right now in our society, because we actually have no time. What I mean by that is, as you can see, I mean, those of you who are very much on social media know that there's, you know, there's no time to explain, there's no time to unpack things. You know, small sound bites are better. There's also, you know, and also unpacking has been made easy by, you know, by other forms of technology. I mean, I know you're going to talk about ChatGPT, like after this, and actually you can, like, you know, that kind of unpacking is also done through these kinds of technologies. And for me, it's like, okay, if we would insist on a project of patience, would that project lead to something else? And should we insist on a project of patience? And with whom must we be patient? And about what? Be patient about the connections that we have to make with each other. And I say this because, I mean, at the end, I'm also saying, I'm not, you know, men have a lot of work and they haven't scratched the surface, and I'm not there to be part of that project. But we are realizing that our society is demanding all of us to participate. And does that participation also require us to be patient with each other so that we can, you know, move together move forward together? Or is it enough to leave everybody else behind and move? And then what would the project of love mean when there's a lot left behind?
Thank you for those provocations, Prof. And I guess the idea is not for you to figure out everything, but to continue probing and asking us those questions. Asipem Kalisa says, is the idea of love that we continue to define leading to deaths of many, ukunyamezela, because there is love, and how that leads to many graves. But is that even worthy of being termed love? Yeah, that's in the chat box. If anybody wants to say something, please feel free as we head towards the closing. But I guess, Prof, you can speak to Asipe's question and comment.
Yeah, it's interesting because Asipe uses the phrase ukunyamezela, perseverance. Yeah, which is actually quite a disgusting term in my context, because it's always given to in the South African context, it is given mostly to Black women. And it's always associated with being in relation to men. So I use disgust in the sense that the connotation of ukunyamezela, and if you break the term apart, ukunyamezela. So first we are nya, and then you are mezela. But the concept itself is, yeah, Asipa, I know you're laughing, but the concept itself in isiXhosa, it is given to women as a condition to survive in a heteronormative context, in a heteronormative relationship, that you would get in there, and the one thing that you know you must do is ukunyamezela. Begezela or nyamezela, but the premise of it is that uyanya. Then uyamezela. And those who speak Xhosa can unpack that.
Sorry, I had interrupted you there. I was going to read. Tunzikazi says, ukunyamezela gugunyanyani, Prof. Let me ask Ongezwa to share her thoughts. Ongezwa, please unmute.
I'm muted. Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for the beautiful conversation and enlightening conversation. I think I'm gonna just go back. I'm not gonna comment in the but I wanna just go back to Prof Zethu's notion of recognition, right? Which kind of reminded me of the Zulu greeting where to a sawubona, like literally, I acknowledge you, I recognize you. And in to just the spectrum of seeing, I mean, in theater, the word theater in Greek means the place of seeing or being seen, right? So I'm just gonna tie up our practice with Princess. So I wonder if the notion of seeing oneself or through in relation to another person is an idealistic principle, right? We must see each other, but also a very horrific method also, because to see your amanyala, meaning like what we create, that is horrific, these constructs, as human beings, it does get to a point where dying is the solution. Like I'm playing around with this way. What now? What else? Haven't we done enough? And I just wanted to put that in the pot of thinking. But I really like the notion of people reckoning and recognizing and how that, yeah, just wanted to say that. And how seeing also is quite a limit, has its own limitation, as just as a practice, that we are also sensory based people. We even love is a sensory based method beyond just being seen.
Thank you for that, Ongezwa. I will ask Tumi to also contribute, and then possibly come back to you, Prof, as we close. I don't see any other hand.
Tumi Mampani. And there's a quote, there's a statement from Clayton as well.
Thank you so much for all of these amazing provocations. I think I am adding a bit to what Ongezwa was talking about, because as you were speaking, Prof Zethu, about thingness, and actually looking at the actual the way that this particular talk has been named, to remember the dismembered. I thought about the kinds of language and grammar that actually does the work of dismemberment, So in Spiller's way, thinking of Spiller's and the way that she shows us how bodies are dismembered from sociality, and how when we language and we use grammar, then it is the small human becomes just a body, removed from love, removed from intimacy, removed from actual sociality. And I'm wondering how then, if we were to, I'm wondering if it is possible that we actually use love as language and grammar to do the work of that remembrance, because as you've already said, there is already a thingness, but the way that I'm seeing this thingness is as dismembered still, because we're not looking at the social values of Black women, of queer people against their bodily usefulness. So for instance, how people are said to be useful. Queer people are hardworking, Black women are hardworking, and that's a way to sort of give them recognition. But can we give recognition in both body and sociality as a way of remembering these bodies? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you to me.
Yeah,
That's
that's a very
quite a
nice
subject. I would love at this point to also read a comment. Clayton Moyo says, I've been working on the online archive on queerness, and I've been.
Princess, you're breaking up. But Prof Zethu, you were also saying something.
Sorry.
No, I mean, yes, I'm very intrigued by Tumi's question, and I want to think about that a little bit.
Sorry, I think there's a tech problem. I'm losing people. I was saying something. Was I audible? I was reading a comment.
Sorry, you broke up. So I jumped.
Oh.
So you can, but we can go back. We can go back to you were reading Clayton's comment.
Okay, I was reading Clayton Moyo's comment to say that most of the pushback that counters conservative religious homophobia insists on the concept of love. Love my neighbor, or love thy neighbor as thyself, or love my neighbor as myself. Azrini Wahidin, sorry if I butchered your name. They say, in the reimagining of love, or within the project of love, what would the opposite of love perhaps look like? I guess, Prof, you can sum up all these perspectives and insights from Tumi, from Clayton, Ongezwa, and then maybe just respond to that as we close, because I don't see anybody else itching to say something. And also Azrine's question.
Okay, let me start with Azrine's question. I actually don't know what the opposite of love is, to be honest, because I don't think it's easy. I mean, it's easy to put love against hatred, and but I think in society we've seen that there's a, and I'm thinking here, in research, for example, we do research on survivors of domestic violence. Their narratives are so full of love. And for me, it's always very interesting to understand what that is about. That coexistence of, and I think I was mentioning it earlier, the coexistence of love in a space that can be so violent and also torturous to some extent. So the opposite of love, Azrine, I don't know. For me, it's not easy to just consider it as hatred or something like that. And I think, yeah, I mean, there's the comment around love as a religious, has religious connotations. Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, right? Because of course and maybe this is where maybe decolonized scholars of religion can actually also help us think through love that doesn't have this kind of baggage, love that doesn't, yeah, and maybe also question, like, what is wrong with loving thy neighbor? Does it automatically mean that you associate with a particular kind of version of love that has all these like very Christian kind of ideas, and maybe not. Within our African context, we talk a lot about the notion of Ubuntu, which also has a kind of a kind of love element in it. Maybe it's not talked in that way, but there is this very deep notion of recognition and seeing people. And of course, I do take Dumi's point that it's also, and Ongezo's point that also seeing has its own limitations, right? But maybe, maybe that is where we could start, is to figure out if the project is really a project of love, what that project would look like, and also to take Dumi's provocation and see what grammar of love, or what grammar does love offer, and what grammar of love can we practice in society, but also practice it as a way of putting things together, of bringing back all that has been disfigured and dismembered, and also, is love as a concept sufficient to do that work? I don't know.
Thank you, Prof. I just want to say that perhaps this project of love looks like what we are also doing here. It is not always spoken. Perhaps sometimes it's embodied. I mean, this is a holiday. Many people are running towards submitting their PhD thesis. So this community, this collab, could be what this love project looks like. And also, we've gone way beyond time, but we still have almost the same number of people that we started with. So I want to acknowledge and recognize this as part of the project of this love. I see Nandi there saying, Prof, please supervise my PhD next year. Okay, that's shooting. They're shooting their shots. I think at this point, I would like to hand over to Catherine or Jill, unless Prof, you have something to add before we close off.
I'm good. Thank you.
Jill, can I hand over to you? Jill's going to tell us
Yes,
about
yes.
upcoming events.
I just actually I was just going to say echo what Princess said and say it's in the time with you today has been just like a gift of love. And I want to first say thank you to everyone for coming and for not just coming, but for remembering and for, in your own ways, remembering and being willing to understand and being willing to see things and wanting to understand. Because I think all of those are practices and acts of love. And as Princess said, and Prof Zethu, what you said about community, you know, communities of care, I think are the ways in which I've seen people start to try and work towards a project of love. And to everybody here today who's been part of that, thank you. Thank you for making this a concept that's much more living and much more real and much more actionable. So it's certainly given me food for thought, the practice of, you know, the project of love, the project of patience in a time of impatience is really a very contradictory, challenging kind of a initiative. You know, how do we define love against something else when we don't want to define love against something else? We want it to be what it is. So all of these are just fantastic. And in particular, Prof Zethu, Mthunzi, Princess, Catherine, for bringing this together, for making it happen, your act of love to us today. And in terms, so that's really all I wanted to say. Just encourage us to find the time for patience and for love. And in terms of upcoming events, there is another discussion happening on the 31st of August around using, Prof Zethu, you referred to it, ChatGPT in our research. How do we use ChatGPT in an intelligent way that doesn't dehumanize ourselves in the process? Yeah, and otherwise, thank you. And have a wonderful day in a caring community.
Yeah, and to also say to those with PhD and masters, the scholarships, the Current Calling scholarships are open until the 25th of August. Get applying.
Yes, yeah. Some of them close on the 29th and some of them close a week earlier. So make sure you know the different dates. I wanted to close with this quote: "We write history with our feet and with our presence and with our collective voice and vision." And with that note, I want to thank you for being here and for your presence today. Thank you so much to Prof Zethu. Absolutely wonderful. You're such a gift. Your thoughts, your ideas, and your passion is such a privilege to sit and listen to and to be exposed to. So thank you for your time. Thank you also to Mthunzi Kazi for that beautiful poetry. We'd love to hear more from you. I'm sorry that part wasn't recorded, but it was absolutely precious. So thank you. And please go and enjoy the rest of Women's Day, everybody.